Financial Officer for Westfield Public Schools. Today we want to give you a quick overview just of what we are looking at in terms of our elementary school project, which would be to combine Abner Gibbs and Franklin Avenue School. And next. So our quick agenda is basically we'd like to keep you informed throughout the process, where we are, where we're going, and how folks can assist. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ricks to talk about, but we are in what is the very beginning stages of the MSBA process, and that's the Massachusetts School Building Authority for those who don't know the acronym. Mr. Ricks? Do you want the mic, or do you think you need it?
Yeah, well, I guess I need it for the radio because former football coach, you can hear me. Evening, everyone. There's been a lot of work that has gone on with the studying that we've done of our enrollments, our projections. You're all aware we looked at an elementary school over in the Cross Street area back before we redistricted and designed a new education model in Westfield. So as a result of restructuring and making schools like Franklin Avenue a K-4, we've reduced our needs working with MSBA to a replacement school in our core area for about 400 kids. It's in the ballpark. It's not going to be exactly 400. But if you look at Westfield historically, I'm lucky. I grew up in town. I went to Prospect Hill, which is now a beautiful housing complex. All my friends went to Mosley, which is going to be one. Many went to Ashley Street, which is now a hole. But in Westfield, we replaced those schools that were neighborhood with regional schools in the 4 quadrants. Southampton Road covers the northwest, Paper Mill in the northeast, Munger Hill in the southeast, and Highland and Juniper back in the southwest. And then we had our core schools in the middle here, back with Abner Gibbs, Franklin Avenue, and Fort Meadow School. Abner Gibbs is 105 years old. Fort Meadow School is 104 years old, or somewhere in that ranges, and they've outlived their lives. In today's world, schools are designed and built for roughly a 50-year life. One of the things that's been very important to us in Westfield is keeping that neighborhood concept. You know, I've said all the time, I was a principal for years, and my kids went to the best elementary school in Westfield. They went to Southampton Road. Then they went to the best middle school. But we have this spirit of wherever your kids go is the best school. And I think that's a gem of Westfield. We create spirits within our school. We create that sense of belonging and identity of who they are. And I know, as a principal of the middle school on both sides of town, our kids came to us equally. I mean, you couldn't tell which school they came from. They came with a great education. As we've moved forward, we've got the newer facilities in the outer quadrants and not in the core area. That's why we're committed to a core area school, so we can keep our kids together. As an educator, I truly believe kids need to be with their peers. Even in today's world, where you can play video games and do other things with kids on the other side of town and not leave the house, they still need the interactions in doing that. So that's why it's so important for us to have a core school down here. And working with MSBA, which is going to provide us funding at almost 70%. We can't afford to build a school without them. And that's reimbursed back to us over 20 years. So with all the redistricting that we've done, our educational approach is how we've designed education. 2 years ago, we submitted what's called a statement of interest to the State Building Authority. And out of that, there were hundreds of them selected or submitted, and we were one of 12 chosen to move forward, to explore a new facility to replace Abner Gibbs and Franklin Avenue.
And actually, we're the only one in Western Mass.
So a lot of work has gone, a lot of background things you'll see as we go through it. We've done a lot of compliance work. Tammy Tess and Sue Phillips from our legal department and our purchasing have really done everything in the background to get to this point. This is still a great school. It's a great facility. Abner Gibbs is a beautiful school. But how do we reshape and provide structures that meet 21st century learning? And you'll see as we get into that, that's what we'll be designing. Classrooms are all different now. I went to Prospect Hill School. There was a front chalkboard in the front, and the walls had windows in that. Today's classrooms have 4 focus walls. They switch around, so there is no front of the rooms. It's designing things like that, just like your kid's room at home. So those are some of the areas that we're looking at. So we got invited last winter to be invited into the Eligibility Study. There are 3 phases in here where we need to get invited. The next one would be the Feasibility Study. We need to get invited with that. At best, that's in January, February of 2020. And then the last other big one to get invited into is in about 2021 is commitment to the funding after we've done feasibilities, and we'll go through each of those. So here's rough timeline. And as Stefan and I and the mayor have met with all the staffs and the PTOs at both schools, and what the biggest word we said is be patient. There's not a new school anywhere tomorrow. We're having an open, at best case scenario, in 2023, because there's so much work that has to go into there with an 18-month to 2-year construction. So we're in the eligibility stage. Involved with that is forming a building committee made up of certain folks that are required by law and by the MSBA to be on it. Tammy, as our purchasing agent, needs to be on it, the superintendent. We've got Cindy Sullivan from the school committee and Bo Sullivan. We need school committee representative, city council representative. We need architectural expertise, a variety of folks that are on there. And then we're looking at bringing in other community members. We're looking to get some parents from each school and community representatives that are involved in it so they'll have a say. So police, fire, and all that. That'll be in the core building committee. But as you can see here is once we get out of the eligibility stage, it turns to green, which means professionals are doing all that work. Professional architects are coming in the study. They're working with schematic designs. We're looking at traffic flows. We're looking at all kinds of feasibility studies to see what's the best interest. And the bottom line is, I was involved with building the new North Middle School back at the time, and we had a lot more say in it. Now MSBA partners with us. It's a joint effort, and the whole idea is to come up with a solution that is the most educationally appropriate and cost-effective solution. That's the exact word from them as to what we'll do. So it's a partnership. We're not going to get what we want. We're going to get what we need, working with professionals. After that, we get into the feasibility studies. We're hoping to get invited into that in January or February of this year, and that's about a 30-month process. It's at least a year, and there's a significant cost to it. So we'll be working with the city council to get some funding to hire the architects to come in, and this is where questions come up and we start working on answers. So tonight, we really don't have answers for you. We just want to keep you aware of what's going on, and we'll be working with you for answers. Give you an example. One of the things they're going to look at is this building infrastructure sound enough and have the infrastructure that we can renovate this and add on an addition for 200 kids? Or do we need to tear it down and build a whole new facility? Is this location appropriate for that? Is there traffic flow? Is the water tables? They'll be looking at everything, and this is what the professionals will be doing, reporting back to us and working with MSBA. That's the feasibility study. Once we come up with that, we'll determine in that study in about 2021 is do we renovate and add on or tear down? And then what does it look like? This is where we have a lot of say in here is the educational scope, what we're looking at. I know as being the financial person is we have students and staff that can't go to Abner Gibbs School because they can't even get in the front door because of limitations. We have extremely small classrooms. We can't service the kids in the neighborhood there, and we have to transport them and assign them into a school outside of their neighborhood. We need to free that up. Our demographics here in the core is we have second language families that are now going to other schools, Munger Hill or Highland. They'll be able to now be housed here along with some other programs of students with special needs. See the concept we're trying of keeping our kids that live near each other together and provide a quality, equitable education. That'll all come back in the schematic design. Here's where we'll be having ad hoc committees, getting input from our teaching staff and our professional educators working with the architect to design within the framework of MSBA what we need. And like I said, I got to renovate South Middle School and build North Middle School, and I can tell you the two big differences. There's big, wide hallways at the middle school now, formerly South, and there's small, narrow ones at North, and there's no storage at North because MSBA will not reimburse for that. But they did in the 60s when they built the other ones. So those are some of the things that we work within their guidelines. Once we get through that schematic design, the big one here is getting invited into the funding. This is where, as we get through the schematics, the architects will project it to be a certain dollar figure. I have no idea what that'll be. But as we get to that, that's when we start looking at, here's the model, here's the approach we want, here's roughly what it'll cost, and then we start working more depthly with Tammy's office of working with the architect, building specs, and going out to bid the process. Once we get invited in, that the state will say, yes, we will be reimbursed. And as I mentioned earlier, right now I think it's 69.82% is what we'd be reimbursed at. So for every dollar, we get 70 cents back.
That is significantly higher than even the previous project,
Which was about 63 or 64% at that point. So again, it's moved up. And then we in design, and then the construction. This is all best case scenario starting in 2022 with 18 to 2 years. Best case scenario, we could open a school in 2023. Just to give you a timeline, that's all likely going to change. Different slide telling you the same thing. I covered all these in our initial compliance is we're due to the MSBA in July. Our enrollment studies, we hired McBroom and McBroom, architects out of Hartford, Connecticut that did our projections. You know, it's amazing. They look at women of childbearing age. They look at how long families stay in Westfield. They did an in-depth study. And what we've shown is our projected enrollment stays pretty level until the year 2025, I think, is as far as they went out. So
MSBA also did a projection. It was pretty much in line.
Yep.
So we have that data.
Which is very different in the year 2000 when we built the middle school, because then our enrollment data was saying we were building all kinds of big houses. Established families were moving in. And what we did is we're coming into fourth grade, so we needed the middle school population. We had a slight increase in the elementary, bigger ones in the middle, so that's changed. Here's the next step that we're hoping to get invited into is the feasibility study. We'll look at our initial space requirement, which we've already done, how many classrooms of the kids, what type of programming. The room you're in right now serves as phys ed, music, lunch, everything else. In a new facility, we would have a separate cafeteria, which would be a common area. Most things become multifunctional, but allows us the flexibility throughout the building. We'll study the existing conditions, develop and look at alternatives, including is this the right spot? Is this the best spot with all of our educational goals and objectives? And the bottom line is what's cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution. That's what we'll partner with MSBA and come up with as the final thing. So this is up to 30 months to get to that point. That just says the same thing that we've done. What have we done? And I try to include in here, we've really studied our needs, we've really studied our demographics. This started back in 2017 when we wanted to close Russell and bring all of the kids back into Westfield. The school committee and the city council were very proactive to make those adjustments so that if we do get this school back and open online in 23, we're really doing minor tweaking. We don't need to redistrict. That was done in 2018 for the start of this year. So those are some of the foresight planning that has gone into it. We redistrict to the K-4 model, allows us to do things of looking at, if you're taking the survey out there, does it make sense now to have preschool rather than in a 104-year-old building included in our neighborhood elementary schools? So it gives us an option. It eliminates a transition. It's something that will be studied in the feasibility aspect. Potential sites, we've done title searches of this property, and it's interesting to go back and look at deeded records from the 1800s. You don't find them on Google, but we were able to do that, and yes, we do own all of the property on here with no restrictions. We've done an initial feasibility study as we looked at the redistricting of closing closing Juniper Park back in 2014, and like I said, we're drafting that. So real quickly, I'm a visual person. Here's your school. In the 50s, this outer campus seemed to make sense. I don't know, in 2019, with our security issues and the things on our mind and the way children have that open thing with the elements back and forth. So in 2014, Reinhardt and Associates, we worked with the architect. We looked at, could we add a wing of 100 students onto Franklin Avenue School so that when we closed Juniper Park, we also looked at Franklin Avenue. There was no room for expansion at Abner Gibbs, so didn't even consider it. If you remember back then, we looked at portables and additions on the South Middle School at the time. But what they did is they came up with, looking at this core structure, we know we have the infrastructure. The sewage is here, the voltage is ample for electricity, we have the cable access, we have the broadband access, we have the water, that's all able to do it. And the core structure in here with revamped heating systems and HV air conditioning systems would support the addition of 6 more classrooms to add 100 kids on, with the concept of connecting that outer campus. So we knew that was feasible from the initial study with the architects. Now we're looking to double it. I just took it, because I don't know how to draw, I just copied that and flipped it on, but some of the initial concepts, and these are no plans, but looking at today's things, we would look at some type of L in here connecting those buildings. You could have an internal courtyard in here, but we could fit that into the slot, into the property. One of the things now we're looking at is, like an internal courtyards, which so kids can have outdoor educational spaces. We know we've got the dike over here as the water retaining. We could also look at areas of things in here. So there is the opportunity to expand here on the initial feasibility request. That's why preliminary we moved down here. The biggest thing we looked at is, again, this was only for 100 more students, which would be about 6 more teaching staff, was now moving into parking and traffic flow. Okay, we know we're in a tight neighborhood here, but we looked at a curb cut out here on Franklin Street with one-way traffic in and out for the safety of kids. As we move into the feasibility study, we'll be looking at that to say, okay, does it make sense if it's one way to come in this way? Now when they come out, they're going out in 3 different areas. How do we get traffic off of here? How do we look at parking aspects and all that? We do know when this school was built, nobody drove their car and dropped kids off. They either walked or they took a bus. Some kids from Prospect Hill took a bus down here that I knew that went to school because we were overcrowded. The other thing we look at is, like over in here and around here, is how do you have multi-purpose facilities? So designed in a new school would be some outdoor learning spaces, not just playgrounds, but outdoor learning opportunities, but also with some pavers in so it serves as overflow parking for parent nights and a variety of other things. So as we work with the architects, we would probably see some idea of, in the front here, some parent drop-off loop, just like we did at North Middle School and the South Middle School when we renovated those in 2000. That'll be built into design based upon talking to neighbors and talking about feedback and the flow. Even though it's 10, 15 minutes a day, it's still a heck of a mess near every school in every state in the country. It's 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. So here's just a quick view of that. The building committee we talked about. I'm going quick because my son's playing in the Western Mass Volleyball State Championship at 6:30, so I'm already late. The building, these are people that are required on it, and here's where we'll be looking for some input, some different representation. We want people that are invested in it and arrived in a variety of things.
And just when it comes to the building committee, we are keeping it at about 15, 16 folks, but we are planning on having subcommittees so that we can have the most voices heard possible. Those subcommittees will report back to the building committee, and that's how that will happen. So now we have, if you want to, right, so we have, so share information with families in the community, help build community support, provide input, ask questions, and be patient, because this is kind of a long process, 4 or 5 years out probably. And as you saw, we are really just in the beginning stages of this, which is why we wanted to get the message out as soon as possible.
And really, our goal is to keep information flowing in. I grew up in Westfield, I live here, and I'm told a lot of things about the school department that I never heard about, okay, at the Big Y, at different places in town, and nobody will believe what I'm saying because whatever they heard first was fact. And I'm like, all right, good. Never had that discussion once. So we're trying to give you the information, get out with it, and involve people early on in the process. So ask questions of us. Working with Stefan for the last 4 or 5 years, he's very open. We're open to give you the right information and getting it out to you. And that's why we met with our teachers, our staffs, and our PTOs, so they had the information as people asked them questions. And we want to do the same thing with you, especially the neighbors. A little larger school here is going to have an impact. We want to have those conversations to minimize it and flush all that out. We'd rather deal with that in the design stage and the feasibility study than afterwards. I'll give you an example. You see the 2 back doors there? I was designing, and one of the mistakes we made at North Middle School is when your kids get there, is there's 4 doors just like that to go into the auditorium, but they're right next to each other. They're not on both sides. As a principal, that's a heck of a jam when you have an assembly. You spread them out. I believe in low tide. Spread people out. The closer they are, good things don't happen. So those are the little things that we have the experience with that we can bring in, and we'd rather learn that now than before we actually build the 4 doors.
The only thing I want to say is any specific questions you may have about the design of the building, the bottom, or whether this building gets expanded or torn down, we don't know those answers. We gave you hypothetical situations, but the reality is that's all going to be decided in the feasibility study. And cost-effective, educationally appropriate, that would be a quote for the paper from me, because I think that's what the MSBA is pushing, and that's what we want as well.
My favorite part.
Questions? So are you okay talking into the mic? Because I just want to let folks know we're broadcasting live on Channel 15 right now.
Taping. Hi.
Taping. Whoops, it'll be live later.
Okay. I'm in a butter to the school here, and nieces and nephews that went here. I have an acre of land. I see those prints that you put up are kind of tight, and there's not a lot of space. You talked about outdoor education spaces. You talked about parent drop-off areas. I didn't see any of those on the plan because you didn't design those yet.
Right.
But I have an acre of land with a house on it over here toward Franklin Street. I'd be willing to offer that to the city if it helps you in any kind of way in expanding this space so that it works for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to get your name before you leave. But actually, we know where you live, so we're good. Any other questions?
But we don't have any plans of needing to take any additional facilities at this time, but with that offer,
That's helpful. In case the feasibility
this is what
study,
we're
it's
looking
good
for
to know.
with the community that will probably follow up, so thank you.
Andrew Surprise, Ward 3 City Councilor. I just want to know if you had any idea, and this is something you may have an inclination of at this point, is what you're going to do with the classes while the construction is going on, how you're going to handle that, and what's the process for that?
I mean, at this point, we haven't even gotten that far in the process, and I'll tell you why. Because if we've done the eligibility and we don't get invited into the feasibility, we're dead in the water, pretty much. But
That'll come with the feasibility. We don't know what the scenario is, Andrew. If it's tear down and rebuild, then obviously we have to relocate the 220 students roughly. There's all different models and there's approaches. In the feasibility, we'll be exploring those options. I know some of the principals that I've worked with in the state and other states is they've done renovations. Like when we built North Middle School, we built the school and moved everybody from the old middle school up there for a year. We were uncomfortable as they renovated to make that equitable. So that was the contingent plan then. We'll figure that out once we get there. We've had some discussion, but we don't know what avenue or direction we're going in. Great question.
So I have a question. If it doesn't happen, what's going to happen to Franklin and Abner Gibbs? Just as, even for security purposes, this year I noticed in this school, they don't have intercoms that work in every single room, and they're using walkie-talkies, and still that's not an effective method to contact all the teachers. And with this day and age, with Alice and everything else set in place, like, what's going to happen? Are we going to invest in these schools and renovate them, or?
I mean, to a certain point, the reason why we went this route is because to renovate these two buildings is less cost efficient than it would be to have a new building for. So yes, the answer is we would dedicate that. I wish I could explain to you the whole sound system in this building. It's quite complicated and why it's not working. But we are actually looking and working with our tech center now to get that repaired because we know we have 4 more years here at least as is.
Yeah, and I know it's cost effective, but even if the teachers had like cell phones instead of the walkie-talkie system, like it's
Actually, the walkie-talkies are more effective in this building because if you tried to make a phone call in this building on your phone today, you will notice that your service is horrible. But we are looking at that.
We are addressing that. We have solutions for that, okay? We put a new roof on the lower campus at Abner Gibbs last summer. I mean, as the financial guy, you know how much that hurts to put a new roof on a 104-year-old building that we need to be out of? But again, we're going to take care of our kids. We are going to invest in those safety security. We've put additional safety features in this building this year along with Abner Gibbs, and we have more planned over the summer and into the fall. And I just don't believe in telling everyone the safety things we're doing.
I
If you
understand.
don't
The
do it,
details.
they know a way around it. I have high school kids that live at home.
Additional questions?
Good. So are we set, or is it based on the survey, that when you do the feasibility, we're going to have the K to 4 or preschool to 4 model?
So when we started working with the eligibility for MSBA, they asked us the question, would we consider putting a preschool into the new building? So we asked that question as part of the survey because that's an answer we have to provide to them as part of the eligibility. I can't predict what they're going to want to do. I know that we'd like to increase the amount of students that attend preschool in the Westfield Public Schools to eliminate the transition that Ron was speaking about. What that looks like, we don't know until the feasibility part. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't. When you look at the amount, I mean, there are 215 kids at Fort Meadow today. I don't think that they would fit at all the schools. I mean, but again, that's what the feasibility study is for. For those of you who aren't, and we didn't say this earlier, but the MSBA was out here, was that last year, checking out the space already. About a year ago, right about this time, because it was hot, I remember. And so they've asked questions that they want, that they think that we should answer, and so we're going to do our best to do so. But I don't have a guarantee for that because I don't believe we pretty much average, every class is over 400 people. I mean, if you had all the preschool kids coming in, I don't know that it would work, but we're asking the question for the survey, and since you brought it up, I'm going to bring that up. There is a survey, if you haven't filled out. We're asking questions about if you're aware of the new school, which now if you haven't taken the survey, you can take it now, and I'll say yes. And then just some thoughts about whether or not you think a new school is needed, and also what the best way is for us to communicate these messages to you. So tonight we have a community forum, but clearly this is not the whole community. We put stuff out on social media, we put stuff out on our website, we did a text message today you may have received to come to this tonight. We've done a robocall, I'm trying to think, I mean, anything at our disposal we have gotten out there. We've had an article in the newspaper, we have the press here again today, thank you, Hope. So we're just trying to figure out what parents prefer as the preferred way to get the word out.
One more thing on the preschool. Fort Meadow is 100-something years old. The State Building Authority does not support the construction or rehabilitation of preschools. It's K through. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at options, because we're dealing with an aging facility there too. But again, we're going to do what's most cost-effective and appropriately educationally sound. So that's the concept.
And to repair Fort Meadow would be exclusively on the city.
On the city.
It would not be. There is no state reimbursement.
Yeah, I guess I was actually thinking about the other end of it, though. Are we going to continue with the intermediate school model for sure?
Stephen, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I see a couple school committee members here. So we took a vote last year to go 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and just have K through 4 in the elementary schools. And actually MSBA looked at that information, and that's one of the reasons why we got to the step that we did, because we took a bold step to move 5th grades out of the elementaries and then be able to shrink down one building to build this. So we're going to stay with unless Cindy changes her mind, we're going to stay the 5th and 6th and the intermediate and the middle school with just K through 4 and potentially preschool in the elementary.
And I just want to say, we surveyed the community for that decision as well, and over 70% of the community supported that change. And again, that question again is on the survey now. So if you want to go to that survey, it's schoolsofwestfield.org. It's on there, or our Facebook page if you're following that at all. Any other questions?
I came to the PTO meeting, I spoke to Todd, and one of my concerns was possibly getting Franklin Ave turned into a one-way. My concern is, I'm all for doubling the size of the school. I think it's awesome. I bought my house on this street 15 years ago. You never even knew there was a school here. Starting about maybe 5 years ago, the amount of traffic, parking, cops being called, city bulldozers having to come in and push snowbanks, to push the snowbanks back. You can't fit a bus down the street at parking, at pick up and drop off. I was wondering what kind of shot would we have? I've talked to a lot of my neighbors, and even they say it sounds like a good idea and they would be for it. I want to know what we have to do living on the street to even have this being an option.
But there's two options, Nick. It is one, that'll all be studied, we'll be involving the neighbors as we look at the traffic flow. Because I said right from the beginning, we know traffic at all schools is an issue now. We do have the traffic commission and there are avenues in the city that we'd be happy to work with you on that as to how we'll go about get traffic changed. I know it's through, I believe it's a traffic commission, which is made up of the police department and other representations in the communities. Okay? But again, it's something we're very aware of. We have an issue with the current school, and especially if we're adding on to it.
And I just want to mention, Abner is not any better. It's the principal from Abner is here too. When that was built, I don't know if they were lucky they had a Model T, but maybe they were still getting around in horse and buggy. So, and if you've been to Abner, there's no parking at all. So, because not everyone had one or two cars like they do today.
Just an example. I live on South Maple Street, and my children are walkers, but I don't allow them to walk because, for instance, there was, the accident with the mother and child on Halloween, and people speed down that road. It's a 30-mile into a 25-mile. Constant speeders. I've had accidents in front of my house within the last year. I would let my kids walk if I felt it was safe. It's not.
And I think as part of the feasibility study, safety is a part of that process.
And our architects, I know with the other concept we do, they build all that in. I mean, there's no really straight shots, especially in the parking lot and the drop-off. There's angles, there's curb cuts that come out. We've done that in some of our streets here. But working with the experts, knowing what our issues are, we'll design solution to that. We're going to design solutions, but you know how people are, right? The no parking sign doesn't apply to them, just everybody else.
Any other questions?
Can you give me some examples of things that would be looked at in the feasibility of whether they would keep this building or build a new one?
Yeah, one is the cost is we'll be down, like I know one of the issues we have here is we have a sunken boiler room. New schools are all one level. One of the initial talks is, even in the preliminary things, is bringing that up to level, looking at the infrastructure, the HVAC system, how much would it cost to renovate it, what materials are in there. Those are all the things that we'll go through and do the study with. But it's basically can this current building be renovated at a reasonable cost and provide a safe, healthy environment for kids, and then support an addition. We know for a new addition, we'd have to redo the whole boiler room. It's probably relocated in the center part of the building, which would now provide full year HVAC, not just heat in the winter.
And I also know that because when I talked to the school council here, there was one of the cafeteria workers is on there, and she told me loud and clear that the kitchen is not big enough to feed 200 more kids. So that was going to have to be redone. So those kinds of things.
Both of my kids went here, so I'm very familiar with the school. One's in high school now, so I've been involved in the school a long time. There's been lots of issues in this building while my kids were here. I'm concerned in regards to, the mold and there's been water damage, years and years of water damage. All those things to be a part of that in creating the school. Because if they're just going to fix it up and add to it, then those things really need to be looked at.
And they would address those water issues that you're talking about as well in part of the rehabilitation of the school.
It's not fixed up. It's
Gutted.
and renovated. We did that in 2000 with South Middle School. They put the air conditioning in. They put a whole new HVAC system. We just did it in City Hall a couple years. They took a beautiful historic building and put the new infrastructure behind it. So it's going to be totally gutted and renovated.
MSBA wouldn't reimburse the 70% for a project.
We haven't gotten
Yeah.
far, but no, there would not be kids in here as they're renovating it.
Right. We would have to do something else.
Most principals I dealt with, if we kept the kids here and built an addition, this is very hypothetical, if I could say it, and and then built the addition. It's so distracting, okay? A third grade boy doesn't care about math. He wants to see the crane out there doing work, right? And then if we move the kids into a new addition, while they renovate this, we still have
Adults too, maybe,
so
Ron, on that. I
we'll be
don't know.
looking at all those. I just want to be in fifth grade.
Yes, okay, yeah.
That kind of makes sense, and so we will be dealing with that as we come. We will build all that into the plan of the feasibility study
And
as to how we go about doing it.
And I can tell you, I hope that you feel that we've already gotten or doing our best to get the word out. We will continue to do that with regular updates as soon as we know. I mean, if we do get invited into the feasibility study, you will know immediately, and then we'll be pretty excited about that. And then as that work moves forward, like we did a survey now, we would certainly bring in families to and have a community forum to get your feedback and input on where we're going. Absolutely. The building committee meetings are also open public meetings. Thank you. Good point. And of course, they'll be discussed at school committee. I mean, it's not that we're not doing this in a vacuum. That is the exact opposite of how I operate. So I want everyone involved in the process because it's not my school, it's not Ron's school, it's our school, the community school.
It's not a question, it's just a statement. I'd first like to thank the cadets and our officers for providing the parking. You guys always come through for us. I'd like to, my name is Chris Tolpa, by the way. I'm the principal here at Franklin. I'd like to thank our city councilors, our school committee, the mayor. This is a big deal. And as I said at the concerts, if you were there, we need voices. We need voices from Franklin and Abner especially. Thank you to the parents that I see here. I so appreciate your involvement, even though your children probably won't be here. But our city is, and it's for our kids. I want to thank the superintendent and Mr. Ricks because they have been so transparent with all of us. Stacy Burgess from Abner and I, they keep us in the loop. So please know that we are hoping to have, it's going to be a long process. It will take patience, but it will be a transparent process, and we want to hear from you. And we encourage you, I implore you, to get all of our parents involved. This is their children's future, their grandchildren's future. And this is a great school. I love this school, but it needs a lot. It has the love that it needs. Now we just need the infrastructure. So again, I want to thank you and encourage you to stay part of this process, even if you don't have kids here.
Thank you, Mrs. Tolpa. I think we're going to let Mr. Ricks go. I think he has a volleyball game to go to or something. Go Bombers!
So, Matt Emmershai, City Councilor at Large. We have an incredible opportunity here to either get a new school or renovate this school and add on, where I think this gentleman brought up a great point with the abutting property he has, where especially if it was, say, to become a new school in terms of situating it in a different location or angle, I think we may have missed the boat a little bit on the lot that just had a new, I believe it was a two-family put on there, constructed next to the property we own there. But I think it's something where we may want to consider spending a little extra money if we have the chance to get the traffic out on the main roads, alleviate some of the traffic for the neighborhood. We know we have issues with Orange Street. Traffic Commission has talked about making that one way. You know, it's one of those things where we have a unique opportunity here, and I think we should capitalize on it. I've been through the additions when I was in school. I was Northampton Schools, JFK with the middle school, renovation and addition. Same thing with the high school up there. So it is disruptive. It does take some time. In the end, I will say it's worth it. And we have a tremendous opportunity here, and I think with the space that we have, we can really make it work. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Duval.
I just want to say that I see this as an investment in the most important resources that we have in our city. And let's think of it that way. We're investing in the families and the kids in the families who then will make the city as good as it is and maybe better.
Thank you, Mr. Duval. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you all for coming. I'll stick around for a little while if you want to come up and ask. And I just wanted, Tammy Teft is here too, the purchaser, not to put her on the spot, but I just did. The mayor is here as well. Cindy Sullivan is here from school committee. So if you have any questions, Bo is also here from school committee. Stacy's here from the principal Abner, and Chris is here. We're here to answer questions. That's what we do. All right. Thank you, everybody.